It's all gone to shit. After the Flames is a 2020 independent anthology film based around apocalyptic stories told by some kids in a barn.
Life as we know it. Gone.
Dealer's choice, just any classic that involves game over.
First up is Road Trip, directed by Ronald J. Wright and starring Velton Leishka, who you may remember from the light-hearted Green Fingers.
It's not to like, mate. You're a great guy. Yeah, but what if he thinks I'm stupid?
But this is far from light-hearted. There's a sense of sadness from the get-go and the sort of impending doom that you can't quite put your finger on, which is the brilliance of the script and the acting. It doesn't tell you anything, but it raises a lot of questions and it gets your imagination going. It's clear that something horrible is going to happen or already has happened, and we're just driving towards it, literally. The film very carefully suggests things and poses questions that we're not going to get the answers to until we reach the destination. So until then, we're just driving towards probably a horrible fate that I'm not going to tell you about right here because it would ruin it. The cinematography in the film is gorgeous. Everything looks polished and clean, and it's a great juxtaposition because of what is just going on underneath, which again I'm not going to ruin, but it's not clean. It's down and dirty and it's nasty, and it builds to an emotional climax that's rare in a sort of horror film scenario. You know, this sort of thing tends to be sort of arsehole characters that you don't really care about just getting picked off, but this one it's much deeper and it's much more emotive and engaging. So it's a beautifully composed shot that respects the audience. It makes you work for it, and in the end, you are rewarded. Kind of. Next up is The Dogs, another suggestive title, and again directed by Ronald J. Wright. So I have a similar sort of. His storytelling is very much the sort I admire. The title's suggestive, but you don't know exactly how that's going to unfold. So you're just sort of going into this world knowing something's not right. You don't know what that is. You're questioning it the whole time. Your imagination's going. You really have to engage with it because it's not telling you everything, like a lesser director or writer would do. So you have to just sit there knowing that you are going to be confronted with something horrible at some point. So in this one, rather than having all that expositional dialogue that drags a lot of films down, the sort of the threat and the world building is very contained and it's carried by the main actors. You have to watch them very closely to see what they're feeling, where they're going. You're trying to read them the whole time. It's really great filmmaking because it really draws you in.
Now we're going on an adventure.
All the story is told through action and acting here. The cinematography is stunning as well. There's all these blues and reds, and the world that they're in just seems so cold and dangerous. And then the payoff, you just got to watch it. Solia Gracia, directed by Danny Cotton and Simon P. Edwards. It opens in a very confined space with this chiaroscuro. You know what I mean? That lighting where there's lots of dark shadows and like big beams of light coming through. It's all very lights and darks. It's very confined and very intense. And you don't know why you're there. And it drags this mystery out for a long time. Not too long, because you're intrigued. Like the previous two films, you want to know what's going on, and it's not telling you. It's suggesting things. It's giving you a feeling. It's giving you a place. But you don't know what's wrong. You know something's wrong, but you don't know what it is. So it stretches that out, and like the first one as well, this one it builds to a sort of an emotional peak that's so rare in sort of these sort of horror thriller post-apocalyptic things, that because they tend to fall just on the sort of genre and they go with like gore or laughs or stuff like that. These films so far are all very personal and very emotional, which is it's very fresh. It's not what you usually get. But that is what you get with independent films. You get to see different, you get to hear different voices, and you get different tastes and textures, and that's what we're getting here. We're getting here this very confined, this very dark, confined, trapped, disturbing thing. But then it opens up, and it leads to more despair and more horror, and then a final twist. That's the editing is so perfect in that. And even though the film it kind of gets bigger at the end, at that point, and the story does get bigger, everything is still subtle and very subjective. It keeps it that way, and it keeps it controlled, and it keeps you controlled. It keeps you right there in the palm of their hand through the whole thing, through the twists and the turns and the emotions and the horror. It keeps it all very small. but I can't say that about the next one.
Without warning, by the time we realized, it was too late.
Oh, whoa, what's going on here? Oh, hey, oh, what's going on here? This is a bit different here for a low budgeter. Can't do this with no money, can you? Well, Shift by Johan Earl. There's been some sort of alien invasion. Earth has been decimated, and the survivors are fighting for freedom from oppression. From oppression.
Location marked.
Imogen?
And the production values are very high here. It looks like a sort of TV, a sci-fi show that would be made on TV. Everything very clean and clinical, very detailed. All the suits, the tech, the CGI. It's the sort of stuff you just wouldn't. I wouldn't think to do with very little money as an independent. But it just goes to show you these things are possible. They're not. These things aren't exclusively in the clutches of the industry. Anyone can now go out and go wherever their imagination leads them. So this one is far from the realism of the first three films. We are into sort of pulp sci-fi territory, and we have this pumping John Carpenter score building up the tension. And unlike the first three that are self-contained stories, this feels more like the beginning of something that's going to get bigger. Even though it's already bigger, it's on a bigger scale than the other films. It feels more like an intro than a self-contained story, but it's thrilling in the time that we're there, and I'd love to see more. So the next segment is To Live from the Land by D.W. Hobson. And from the land we see. So from the get-go, I love the colours and the cinematography in this film. We really are living in the land here. It's the earth tones, the attention to detail, cobwebs, soil, dirt. It feels like when you find sort of muck in your shoe after you've gone on a camping trip, and you're like, how did that get into my house? It's that very mucky sort of. There's no home comforts there, and it feels strange. It feels strange how tactile that is when you're watching it. You feel it like, God, I stayed in a tent once and that was bad. Imagine having to live like that. Again, we're in a future and we don't know how far. We don't know how far or what's happened, why the world is like this, but judging by the pidgin English that the people talk, we are quite far from civilization, because even language has started to deteriorate.
Oh, no visits!
Sorry, sir. Not trouble. Just hurt bad.
I thought that was a really clever little detail there. Again, like instead of showing like I remember seeing the remake of Dawn of the Dead. It's like very early on, like one of the first shots you see it, like a big shot of the city, and it's all on fire and burning and stuff. And I was like, but in the original one, the opening shot was just someone in the corner of a TV station, and it was so much more effective. Because you're just seeing people rushing around and you're hearing all this noise and stuff, but it is just someone in a corner. Like it's specifically framed in a corner so she's trapped. So it's like clever things like that to do that, and then you get to Zack Snyder and he's just like, look, the whole city's on fire. Like this is more like the original Dawn of the Dead. Like you don't need to see the entire world to see what's happened. You see that people are sort of scruffy, barefoot, everything's dirty, and they can't even speak English anymore, because that's how far we are from civilization. Like how dangerous is civilization when people can't even talk anymore? People have no access to language, so the lexicon's completely crumbling. Communication is crumbling. Like how dangerous is this world? See, it's raising so many more questions just with that clever little thing there, than just showing a building on fire in the distance or something like that. It's really clever filmmaking. It's really clever showing, not telling filmmaking. So I loved that. It's very confident in what it's doing. And it's confident in letting this sort of slow burn of a story just sort of simmer along. It doesn't need to get in your face and tell you these things like Zack Snyder would. We just go along with the pace of the story, and we're like, well, where are we going now? We've got so many questions, and they are eventually answered. But as usual, I'm not going to answer them for you. You're going to have to watch it. So yeah, I loved that segment. It's just so earthy. Whoa, what are we doing out here now? Red Hair Jagathiva, Journey. Don't know what I think about this. It's quite out there. But then the best experimental films are. And the best experimental films don't make you think, they make you feel. This film made me feel. It made me feel lost, it made me feel despair, it made me feel some hope at some points. It also reminded me of a weird dream I had once when the film Moon first came out. I had a dream that I went to the cinema to see it, and all it was Sam Rockwell was attached to a moon base by a sort of umbilical cord, and he was just floating around tripping, and inside his helmet his life was being replayed in this weird sort of fast forward motion, and every now and again a Rolf Rue would come on and say chapter 2 or chapter 2 or bring me some kids. So yeah, the best experimental films, they make you feel, they don't make you think. That's the difference. When you go that far out there, because there's a sort of middle ground where people will watch something weird that it kind of suggests something but doesn't quite go there, and then you end up pissed off at the end. But the films that go that far out, that you really don't, you aren't thinking about anything, you just sort of let it go, and you feel. That's where this film is. I thought that's a great way to end the film, because it's to end the sort of anthology, because it's so different to the others, and it's so ambitious in a different way. They're all ambitious, because making a film full stop is ambitious, because it's not easy. It's really not easy. You have to live, you have to learn, you have to work hard, you have to think about everything, and then you have to find people to watch it.
Thank you.
Angie, thank you.
Stylish, subtle, like poetry.
So after that experimental trip, we end up back with the kids, and then there's another surprise at the end that I'm not going to ruin. So yeah, that's it. After the Flames, I thought a good selection of films in there. There's some really good filmmaking. There's a lot of unique voices in the film, which you will only get from independent film, because they're not playing by the rules. They're doing what they want. They're expressing themselves the way that they want to, and I hope they all continue to do that in the future. And you can help them by watching the film. Just go over to Amazon Prime and drop a $2.99 in there. That's less than a 4-pack. It's less than a McDonald's meal these days, that, isn't it? I don't know. I don't eat that much. Of course I don't. Anyway, as usual, the link will be below. Check it out, please. Check it out, please. Leave them a review. Support independent film, as always, and help us push the movie streaming revolution into the next gear. And I'll be back next week with another indie short reviews. Don't know why I pointed like that. Bye.